Full story. In front of the pack, my alpha replaced me with another woman at our child's naming ceremony. In front of the pack, my alpha replaced me with another woman at our child's naming ceremony. Copy story. She had been awake since 4 in the morning, not because the baby woke her up. He was actually sleeping soundly for once, wrapped in the white blanket her mother had brought from her hometown. Adayeze was awake because something in her chest would not settle. She lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling of the room she had shared with Kelechi for 2 years, and she could not explain the feeling. It was not excitement, though today was supposed to be one of the happiest days of her life. It was not fear exactly. It was the kind of quiet that feels wrong, like when a place is too still and you cannot figure out why. She got up anyway. She made herself tea she did not finish. She bathed slowly, dressed carefully, and picked out the orange and gold wrapper she had saved for this occasion. Her son's naming ceremony. 40 days old. The day the family would gather, the elders would bless him, and he would be given his name in front of everyone. It was tradition. It meant something. And for a long time, it was the day Adaize had been holding on to like a rope. The idea that once the baby came, once the ceremony happened, everything would go back to the way things used to be between her and Kelechi. She carried her son out to the sitting room and held him against her shoulder in the way she had learned he liked. Chest to chest, her hand patting his back in a slow rhythm. He made a small sound and went quiet again. She stood at the window and watched the compound slowly come to life outside. The decorations were already up from the night before. Orange and white, balloons tied to the gate, a banner with a name on it that she had suggested and Kelechi had agreed to without much response. The way he agreed to most things she said these days, with a nod that meant nothing. Kelechi had left before she woke up. She noticed his side of the bed was cold when she stretched her hand across it. She told herself he had probably gone to check on the arrangements. He was the alpha of their community group, a tight, close circle of people from the same region who had all ended up in the same city and built something that felt like a small village inside a big one. There were duties. There were always duties. She had accepted that from the beginning. She had accepted a lot of things from the beginning. By 9 in the morning the compound was full. His mother arrived first, dressed beautifully, greeting everyone loudly. She hugged Adaize briefly, the kind of hug that touches shoulders but not hearts, and then moved to the other side of the room to sit with the women from Kelechi's side of the family. Adaize's own mother arrived shortly after, smaller and quieter, and came directly to where Adaize was standing and held her face in both hands for a moment, without saying anything. Her mother always did that. It used to make Adaize feel like a child. Today it made her feel like she needed it. People kept arriving. The compound filled with color and noise, and the smell of food cooking in the back. Someone put music on, the old kind, the ceremonial kind that played at every naming event she had ever attended growing up. Children were running between people's legs. The elders had settled into their seats under the canopy. Everything looked exactly as it was supposed to look, and yet Adaize could not shake the feeling. She noticed small things as the morning went on. Kelechi's younger sister, who was usually warm with her, avoided her eyes when they greeted each other. One of his uncles walked past her without acknowledging her at all, which was strange, because the man had always been friendly. When she went to ask one of the women helping with the food if everything was ready, the woman smiled at her with that particular kind of smile people give you when they feel sorry for you but cannot say why. Adaize asked herself if she was imagining things. She had been told before that she was too sensitive. She filed the observations away and went back to holding her son. Her mother came and sat next to her about 30 minutes before the ceremony was due to start. She did not say anything controversial. She just sat close, the way a person does when they are trying to be within arm's reach, without making it obvious. Kelechi appeared, just as the elders called for the ceremony to begin. He was dressed well, the navy agbada he had gotten made for important occasions. He greeted the elders, shook hands with the men, and acknowledged the crowd with the easy confidence he always carried. He had a way of walking into a room that made everyone turn to look at him. Adaize had once loved that about him. She watched him now from her seat and waited for him to look at her. He did not. The opening prayers were said. Palm wine was passed around. One of the elder women gave a short speech about the joy of new life and the responsibilities of a community to raise a child well. People nodded and clapped at the right moments. Adayeze sat with her son in her arms and told herself that when Kelechi took the microphone, he would look at her then. He would reach for her hand. He would say her name. Kelechi took the microphone. He thanked the elders first, then he thanked his family, then the community members who had come from far. His voice was steady and warm, the voice he used when he was speaking for the group, the leadership voice. He spoke about the baby, about how grateful he was, about what the child meant to the family line, about the name he carried and what it stood for. The crowd responded beautifully. There was laughter at one point, and then a moment of genuine warmth that moved through the compound like a gentle breeze. He did not say Adaze's name. Not once. Not even as the mother of the child. He spoke about the baby as though he had come into the world through ceremony alone. And then, Kelechi paused. The kind of pause that is not accidental. He looked toward the entrance of the compound, and the crowd followed his gaze the way crowds do. Automatically, together. A woman walked in. She was dressed in rich fabric, her head wrap perfectly tied, her steps slow and deliberate. She was not someone Adaize recognized at first, and then she was. A woman from within the community. Someone Adaize had greeted at events before, someone who had eaten at tables she sat at, someone whose existence she had never once considered as a threat. Kelechi called her forward. He took her hand. He told the pack, those were his words, the pack, the community, their people, that she was his chosen woman, that she would stand beside him, that he wanted everyone gathered there that day to receive her and recognize her in that role. He said it calmly, clearly, in front of the elders, in front of his mother, who stared at the ground, in front of Adaeze's mother, who went very still, in front of everyone who had come that morning to celebrate a child, and were now witnessing something else entirely. The compound did not erupt. That is the part that people who were not there sometimes find hard to believe. There was no shouting, no immediate chaos. What happened instead was a silence that pressed down on everything. A collective holding of breath. The kind of silence that means a room full of people all received the same shock at the same moment, and none of them knew yet what to do with it. Someone's child laughed at something in the background, not knowing, and the sound was almost unbearable in how ordinary it was. Adaize sat completely still. Her son was in her arms. He was awake now, looking up at her face with the unfocused gaze of a 40-day-old baby who does not yet understand faces, but feels the warmth of the person holding him. She looked down at him. She could feel her own heartbeat. Not fast, just present in a way she was suddenly very aware of. The orange and white decorations blurred at the edges of her vision. She did not cry. She was not sure she was breathing normally. She was not sure of anything except the weight of her son in her arms, which was real and solid, and hers. Her mother stood up. Nobody else in that compound moved, but her mother stood and walked through the seated crowd without hurrying, without looking at Kelechi, without acknowledging the other woman or the elders or any of the many faces turning to watch. She walked directly to where Adaize was sitting, bent down, and lifted the baby gently out of Adieze's arms. She passed the baby to a younger cousin nearby, with a quiet instruction, and then she straightened up, took Adaize's hand, and walked her out of the compound. Not dramatically, not with words, just out. The air outside was different, cooler, or maybe it just felt that way. Adaize walked with her mother to the car parked outside the gate, and they sat in it for a long time without driving anywhere. Her mother did not tell her what to feel. She did not say he was never good enough, or that she had always known, or any of the things people say that are true but useless in that moment. She just sat next to her daughter in a quiet car, while the sound of the ceremony continued faintly on the other side of the wall. That night, Adaize sat in her mother's kitchen. The baby was asleep in the next room. The house was quiet, and it was past midnight, and she had not cried yet. Not because she was strong, but because some pain takes time to find its way out. She sat at the table and she spoke. Not in pieces, not in the confused and tangled way she might have spoken a year ago, when she was still making excuses. She spoke plainly. She named the months she had spent explaining away his coldness. She named the times she had told herself that pregnancy was hard on men too, that he was under pressure, that the distance between them was temporary. She named the moment at the ceremony when she understood that it was not temporary, that it had never been about pressure or distance. that she had been managed, not loved, for longer than she wanted to admit. Her mother listened to all of it. The weeks that followed were not graceful. There is a version of this story where Adayeze rose immediately, rebuilt with speed and fire, and became someone unrecognizable from the woman who sat in that compound, holding a baby, while her life changed shape. But that is not what happened. What happened was ordinary and hard. She filed the documents she needed to file. She moved the rest of her things. She blocked the numbers that needed to be blocked, and then unblocked one of them at 2 in the morning 3 weeks later, and immediately blocked it again. She went back to work before she was probably ready. She sat with her son at night after he fed, and sometimes she talked to him, softly, about nothing in particular, just to fill the silence with something that felt like warmth. People from the community reached out. Some were genuinely apologetic. Others were apologetic in the way people are when they watch something wrong happen and did nothing. They want the person who was hurt to forgive them without them having to ask directly. Adayeze stopped responding to those messages. Not out of anger, just because she had realized, somewhere in those quiet late nights, that she had spent years managing other people's comfort around her own pain. She was done doing that. About 3 months later, she took her son for a routine checkup. The doctor's form asked for both parents' details. She filled in her information and left the father's section with only his name, nothing more. On the way out, carrying her son against her chest the way he still liked, she stopped at the door for a second. Not because she was sad, just because the weight of him was good, solid, real. The same way it had been on that morning in the compound when everything else stopped making sense. She had walked into that ceremony, believing the child would fix something between her and a man who had already decided she did not matter. She walked out of those months understanding something quieter and more permanent. That she had always mattered. That the problem was never her. And that the most important thing she could do now was make sure her son grew up knowing what it looked like when a person showed up, stayed, and chose someone every single day. She was going to show him that. Not in grand gestures, not in speeches. Just in the ordinary, unglamorous, faithful way of a woman who had been broken in public and rebuilt in private, and decided that was enough. It was enough.